Tonight, we're going to explore what medieval junk food was like. So, without further ado, let's begin our story. The cobblestone streets of medieval towns carried scents that would seem foreign to our modern noses, yet surprisingly familiar in their essence of temptation and indulgence. While we often imagine medieval life as austere and lacking in pleasures, the reality painted a different picture entirely. One where common folk found their own versions of what we might recognize today as junk food, though crafted from ingredients and methods that belonged entirely to their time and place. Picture, if you will, a bustling market day in 13th century London, where vendors called out their wares with voices that cut through the morning mist. Among the serious business of selling bread and meat, there existed a parallel economy of treats and sweets that drew children and adults alike with an almost magnetic pull. The medieval equivalent of our corner candy store wasn't a building at all, but rather a collection of wandering sellers who carried their delights in baskets and pouches, moving through crowds like sweet-scented phantoms of pleasure. Honey cakes represented perhaps the most beloved of these medieval indulgences, though they bore little resemblance to the light, airy confections we might expect. These dense, sticky creations were more akin to what we might call energy bars today, packed with honey that had been heated until it reached that perfect consistency between liquid and solid. Bakers would mix this precious sweetener with coarse flour, sometimes adding nuts when they could afford them, creating treats that could satisfy hunger while delivering an almost shocking burst of sweetness to palates accustomed to much blander fare. The process of making these honey cakes was itself a form of alchemy that transformed simple ingredients into something approaching magic. Medieval bakers would heat their honey in great copper pots, watching carefully as it bubbled and transformed, knowing that the difference between perfection and disaster lay in moments of timing that could only be learned through years of practice. The honey would darken as it cooked, taking on flavors that ranged from floral to almost smoky, depending on the flowers that had fed the bees and the skill of the baker tending the fire. What made these treats particularly special was their rarity and expense. Honey was liquid gold in medieval times, literally worth its weight in more precious substances, which meant that honey cakes weren't everyday indulgences, but rather special treats reserved for market days, festivals, and moments when a few extra coins jingled in someone's purse. Children would press their faces against the stalls where these cakes were displayed, their eyes wide with longing as they breathed in the intoxicating aroma of caramelized honey and warm spices. Spices played a crucial role in medieval junk food, though not always the ones we might expect. While exotic imports like cinnamon and nutmeg were reserved for the wealthy, common folk had access to local herbs and seasonings that they used with surprising creativity. Wild mint found its way into honey confections, creating combinations that were both refreshing and sweet. Fennel seeds added a subtle licorice note that complemented honey beautifully, while caraway provided an earthy counterpoint to overwhelming sweetness. The art of preserving fruits led to another category of medieval treats that functioned as both sustenance and indulgence. Dried fruits weren't simply left to wither in the sun, as we might imagine, but were often coated in honey or tree sap, creating chewy, intensely flavored morsels that could satisfy cravings for sweetness while providing real nutritional value. Apples, pears, and plums were transformed through this process into something entirely different from their fresh counterparts, concentrating their flavors into almost candy-like intensity. Medieval confectioners, though they wouldn't have recognized that modern term, developed techniques for creating what they called comfits, small seeds or pieces of fruit that were repeatedly coated with sugar or honey until they became smooth, round treats. The process was laborious and required patience that seems almost impossible by today's standards. Seeds like coriander or fennel would be placed in large pans and slowly rotated while thin layers of sweetener were applied, building up gradually until the original seed was encased in a smooth shell of concentrated sweetness. The social aspect of consuming these treats was just as important as their taste. Unlike modern snacking, which often happens in isolation, medieval junk food was almost always shared and communal. Families would purchase a single honey cake and break it into pieces, savoring not just the sweetness but the ritual of sharing something special. Street vendors understood this dynamic and would often sell their wares in portions designed for groups rather than individuals, encouraging the social bonding that came with shared indulgence. Nuts played a fascinating role in medieval snack culture, though their preparation differed dramatically from anything we know today. Roasted nuts were common enough, but medieval cooks took the concept much further, creating elaborate preparations that transformed simple nuts into complex treats. Almonds might be ground into paste and mixed with honey, then formed into shapes and decorated with colored preparations made from flower petals. These weren't just foods but edible art pieces that demonstrated both skill and creativity. The seasonal nature of medieval treats added an element of anticipation and scarcity that made them even more desirable. Spring brought the first fresh herbs that could be candied or incorporated into honey preparations. Summer offered fruits that could be preserved in increasingly elaborate ways. Autumn was the season of nuts and the final honey harvest, when the most complex confections could be created. Winter was a time of rationing these preserved sweets, making each bite more precious because everyone knew supplies were finite. Religious festivals provided opportunities for indulgences that would otherwise be impossible to justify. The medieval church understood human nature well enough to know that complete abstinence from pleasure was unrealistic, so feast days became occasions when rules about frugality could be temporarily suspended. Special treats were created specifically for these occasions, often incorporating symbols and shapes that carried religious meaning while still delivering the satisfaction of sweetness and indulgence. Bread, the staple of medieval life, was transformed into treat form through techniques that seemed simple but required considerable skill to execute properly. Sweetbreads weren't just regular bread with honey added, but rather carefully crafted creations that balanced sweetness with texture in ways that satisfied cravings while still providing substance. These might be enriched with eggs when available, creating a richness that contrasted beautifully with the typical coarse bread that formed the basis of most meals. The medieval equivalent of candy shops were the stalls of spice merchants, who sold not just cooking ingredients, but prepared confections made from their exotic imports. A merchant who dealt in imported spices might also create small treats that showcase these precious ingredients, selling tiny portions of intense flavor that gave customers a taste of luxury they couldn't otherwise afford. A single peppercorn coated in honey might cost more than a loaf of bread, but for special occasions, such extravagances were considered worthwhile. What's particularly fascinating about medieval junk food is how it reflected the broader culture's relationship with scarcity and abundance. Unlike our modern era of constant availability, medieval treats were precious partly because they were rare. This scarcity didn't diminish their appeal, but rather enhanced it, creating an emotional connection to food that went beyond simple nutrition or even pleasure. Each bite of a honey cake or candied fruit carried with it the knowledge that such indulgences were temporary and special. The preparation methods used by medieval confectioners reveal a deep understanding of how to maximize flavor and appeal using limited ingredients and primitive equipment. Without refined sugar, thermometers, or modern preservation techniques, they developed methods that often produce superior results to what we might achieve today with all our technological advantages. The slow, careful process of reducing honey to exactly the right consistency, the patient layering required to create perfect comfits, the timing needed to preserve fruits at their peak ripeness, all of these required skills and knowledge that were passed down through generations of practitioners. Children in medieval times didn't have access to the constant stream of sweets that modern kids take for granted, which made each encounter with treats a memorable event. A child might remember for years the taste of a particular honey cake purchased at a fair, or the way a piece of candied fruit made their whole mouth light up with sweetness. These memories weren't just personal, but became part of family and community lore. Stories told and retold about special treats and the occasions when they were enjoyed. The economics of medieval junk food created interesting social dynamics that don't exist in our modern consumer culture. Because sweet treats were expensive and rare, sharing them became a way of demonstrating affection, respect, or social connection. Offering someone a piece of candied fruit or a small honey cake was a gesture that carried real meaning, representing a genuine sacrifice of something valuable. This made the social aspects of eating these treats as important as their taste and nutritional value. Regional variations in medieval treats reflected local ingredients and traditions in ways that created distinct food cultures within broader medieval society. Areas with access to honey produced different types of confections than regions where tree saps were more readily available. Coastal communities had access to different preserving techniques than inland areas, leading to unique preparations that couldn't be found elsewhere. These regional specialties became sources of pride and identity, with travelers often seeking out local treats as ways of experiencing the unique character of different places. The medieval kitchen garden played a crucial role in snack preparation, providing herbs and small fruits that could be transformed into treats through careful preparation and preservation. Many families maintained small patches where they grew mint, fennel, and other plants specifically for their confectionery value rather than their nutritional importance. These gardens required minimal space, but provided ingredients that could transform simple honey or preserved fruits into much more complex and satisfying treats. Medieval festivals and markets created temporary communities centered around the enjoyment of special foods and treats. These gatherings weren't just commercial events, but social occasions where the normal rules of frugality and restraint could be temporarily suspended. Vendors would compete not just on price, but on creativity and quality, developing signature preparations that became associated with their stalls and drew customers back year after year. The atmosphere of these markets was charged with anticipation and indulgence, creating memories that lasted far longer than the treats themselves. The preservation techniques used to create medieval treats often produced flavors that were more intense and complex than their fresh equivalents. Fruits that were carefully dried and then coated with honey developed concentrated sweetness that was almost overwhelming by modern standards. Nuts that were processed with various spices and sweeteners became vehicles for flavor combinations that don't exist in contemporary cuisine. These preparation methods weren't just practical responses to the need for preservation, but artistic expressions that elevated simple ingredients into something approaching luxury. Seasonal availability created rhythms of anticipation and satisfaction that shaped the entire medieval approach to treats and indulgences. People planned and saved for specific times of year when particular treats would be available, creating cycles of denial and indulgence that made each sweet experience more meaningful. The first honey cakes of spring, the preserved fruits of late summer, the nut confections of autumn, each had its place in an annual cycle of treat consumption that connected food to broader patterns of seasonal celebration and community life. The medieval understanding of balance between health and indulgence was sophisticated in ways that modern culture has perhaps forgotten. Treats weren't seen as purely harmful indulgences, but as necessary components of a balanced life, providing not just physical pleasure, but emotional and social satisfaction that contributed to overall well-being. Medieval physicians often prescribed certain sweet preparations as medicines, recognizing that the psychological benefits of treats could contribute to physical health in measurable ways. Street food culture in medieval times included many preparations that functioned as both sustenance and treats, blurring the line between meal and snack in ways that seem modern despite their ancient origins. Vendors would sell small pies filled with fruits and honey, handheld treats that provided energy and satisfaction while being portable and convenient for people engaged in the busy activities of market towns. These proto-convenience foods required skill to prepare and were prized for their ability to deliver complex flavors in simple, portable packages. The medieval spice trade created opportunities for treats that incorporated exotic flavors in ways that were impossible for most people to experience otherwise. A merchant returning from distant lands might bring back small quantities of unusual spices that local confectioners would incorporate into special preparations, creating treats that provided glimpses of far-off places and cultures. These exotic confections were extremely expensive, but offered experiences that couldn't be obtained any other way, making them precious beyond their simple food value. Religious symbolism found its way into medieval treats through shapes, colors, and preparation methods that carried spiritual meaning alongside their gustatory appeal. Confections might be formed into crosses or other religious symbols, connecting the physical pleasure of eating sweets with spiritual contemplation and celebration. These symbolic treats were especially popular during religious festivals, where their meaning enhanced their taste and made them more satisfying on multiple levels. The craft aspects of medieval confectionery required skills that were considered art forms rather than simple food preparation. Master confectioners were respected artisans who commanded high prices for their skills and were often sought after by wealthy families for special occasions. Their techniques were closely guarded secrets that were passed down through apprenticeships that lasted for years, creating a professional class of specialists who elevated treat making to a level of sophistication that rivals anything produced today. Medieval children developed sophisticated palates for sweets, despite having access to far fewer varieties than modern kids enjoy. A child who tasted honey cakes regularly could distinguish between different types of honey, different preparation methods, and varying levels of quality in ways that required genuine expertise. This discrimination wasn't snobbishness, but a natural result of experiencing fewer treats with greater attention and appreciation, developing deeper connections to the foods they did have access to. The preservation of medieval treat recipes happened through oral tradition and hands-on teaching rather than written cookbooks, which means that many techniques were lost over time, but those that survived were refined through countless repetitions and improvements. Each generation of confectioners added their own innovations while maintaining the essential characteristics that made particular treats appealing, creating an evolutionary process that produced increasingly sophisticated results over time. Seasonal ingredients created natural variety in medieval treats that prevented the boredom that might come from having access to the same confections year-round. Spring treats featured early herbs and flowers. Summer preparations highlighted fresh fruits at their peak. Autumn brought nuts and final honey harvests. And winter was the season for enjoying preserved treats that carried the flavors of warmer months through the cold period. This natural rhythm created anticipation and satisfaction that enhanced the enjoyment of each season's special offerings. The medieval approach to sweetness was fundamentally different from our modern relationship with sugar, based as it was on honey, fruit, and tree saps that provided complex flavors alongside their sweetening properties. Honey carried floral notes that varied depending on the flowers that fed the bees, creating regional variations in sweetness that don't exist in our standardized sugar culture. Tree saps like maple provided different types of sweetness that complemented certain preparations better than others, requiring confectioners to understand not just sweetness in general, but the specific characteristics of different sweetening agents. Medieval treats often incorporated elements that served both practical and aesthetic purposes, using natural colorings from flower petals or fruit juices to create visual appeal that enhanced the eating experience. These natural colorings provided subtle flavors alongside their visual contribution, creating multi-sensory experiences that engaged sight, smell, and taste simultaneously. The preparation of these natural colorings was itself a specialized skill that required knowledge of which plants would provide the desired colors without introducing unwanted flavors or toxins. The social significance of sharing medieval treats extended beyond simple generosity to include complex systems of reciprocity and relationship building that helped maintain community bonds in societies without modern social safety nets. Sharing a precious sweet might create obligations and connections that would be called upon in times of need, making important components of social networks that provided security and support. These sharing relationships were understood by all participants and created webs of mutual obligation that helped communities function effectively. Medieval confectioners developed techniques for creating textures that don't exist in modern confectionery, using ingredients like tree gums and natural thickeners to create unique mouthfeels that enhance the flavor experience of their treats. These texture innovations required deep understanding of how different ingredients interacted under various conditions, knowledge that was developed through experimentation over many generations of practitioners. The resulting treats often had complex textures that changed as they were chewed, providing evolving experiences that kept the eater engaged throughout consumption. The medicinal aspects of medieval treats reflected an understanding of food as medicine that was more sophisticated than our modern separation of these concepts suggests. Confectioners often incorporated herbs and spices that were known to have beneficial health effects, creating treats that provided pleasure while also contributing to physical well-being. These medicinal treats weren't just folk remedies, but represented genuine understanding of how certain plant compounds could affect human health when consumed in appropriate quantities and combinations. Regional trade networks created opportunities for medieval treat exchanges that introduced new ingredients and techniques to different areas, leading to fusion innovations that combined traditional local methods with exotic imported elements. A confectioner in one region might learn about a technique from a traveling merchant and adapt it to work with local ingredients, creating new treats that reflect both traditional knowledge and innovative adaptation. These cultural exchanges through food helped spread knowledge and techniques across medieval Europe in ways that contributed to overall culinary development. The ceremonial aspects of medieval treat consumption created rituals around eating that enhanced the psychological satisfaction derived from these special foods. Certain treats might be consumed only at specific times or in particular ways, creating anticipation and meaning that went far beyond simple taste preferences. These rituals often had religious or cultural significance that connected the physical act of eating sweets with broader patterns of community celebration and spiritual observance. Medieval confectioners understood the importance of presentation in ways that seem surprisingly modern, creating treats that were as visually appealing as they were delicious. Without modern food coloring or elaborate decorating tools, they used natural ingredients and simple techniques to create confections that delighted the eye as well as the palate. The visual appeal of these treats was considered just as important as their taste, reflecting an understanding that eating is a multi-sensory experience that begins before the first bite. The medieval concept of moderation in treat consumption was based on practical understanding of how the body processes different types of foods rather than abstract moral principles about indulgence and restraint. People understood that consuming large quantities of honey-based treats could cause digestive distress, so they developed customs around appropriate portion sizes that maximized enjoyment while minimizing negative effects. This practical wisdom created sustainable approaches to treat consumption that allowed people to enjoy sweets without experiencing the negative consequences of overindulgence. Traveling merchants and craftsmen created informal networks for sharing information about regional specialties and preparation techniques, leading to gradual spread of innovations across medieval Europe. A merchant who discovered a particularly effective method for preserving fruits in one region might carry that knowledge to other areas, where local confectioners would adapt the technique to work with their available ingredients and tools. These informal knowledge networks help drive innovation and improvement in treatment preparation methods across wide geographic areas. The medieval understanding of flavor combinations was sophisticated, despite limited access to exotic ingredients. Based on deep knowledge of how local herbs, spices, and natural sweeteners could be combined to create complex and satisfying taste experiences. Confectioners developed flavor profiles that balanced sweetness with other taste elements like sourness from fruits, bitterness from certain herbs, and saltiness from natural sources. These balanced flavor combinations created treats that were more satisfying and less cloying than simple sweetness alone would provide. Seasonal festivals created opportunities for confectioners to experiment with special preparations that would only be made once per year, leading to innovations that might eventually become regular offerings if they proved popular. These festival specials allowed confectioners to try new techniques or ingredient combinations without the risk of wasting precious materials on untested recipes, since the festive atmosphere made customers more willing to try unusual preparations. Some of these experimental treats became beloved traditions associated with specific celebrations. The medieval approach to food safety and treat preparation was based on understanding of natural preservation and fermentation processes that actually produced safer products than many modern confections. The high sugar content of honey-based treats created environments hostile to harmful bacteria, while the fermentation processes used in some preparations actually improved safety by producing beneficial microorganisms that prevented spoilage. These natural safety mechanisms were understood and deliberately utilized by medieval confectioners. Medieval treats often incorporated multiple textures within single preparations, creating eating experiences that evolved as the confection was consumed. A honey cake might have a crispy exterior that gave way to a chewy interior, with embedded nuts providing contrasting crunchiness throughout the eating experience. These textural variations required careful control of preparation methods and timing to achieve the desired results, representing sophisticated understanding of how different cooking techniques affected food structure. The economic impact of treat production in medieval communities extended beyond simple commerce to include effects on agriculture, trade relationships, and local employment patterns. Communities that became known for particular specialties might attract traders and visitors specifically seeking those treats, creating economic benefits that extended far beyond the direct sales. The reputation of local confectioners could enhance the overall economic attractiveness of a community, making treat production an important component of regional development. Medieval confectioners developed storage and preservation techniques that extended the shelf life of their treats far beyond what might be expected from the available technology. Understanding of how different ingredients affected preservation, combined with knowledge of proper storage conditions, allowed them to create treats that remained appealing for weeks or even months after preparation. These preservation techniques were closely guarded professional secrets that gave successful confectioners significant competitive advantages. The apprenticeship systems used to train medieval confectioners created deep knowledge transfer that went far beyond simple recipe sharing to include understanding of timing, technique, and the subtle variations that distinguished excellent treats from merely adequate ones. These training relationships often lasted for years and created bonds between master and student that continued throughout their careers. The knowledge gained through these intensive apprenticeships created a professional class of specialists whose skills were genuinely remarkable by any standard. Medieval treats reflected broader cultural values about the relationship between work and pleasure, scarcity and abundance, individual satisfaction and community obligation. The careful balance between indulgence and restraint that characterized the medieval approach to treats demonstrates sophisticated understanding of human psychology and social dynamics that created sustainable patterns of consumption and enjoyment. These cultural attitudes toward treats provide insights into medieval life that go far beyond simple food history to illuminate broader patterns of social organization and community life. The medieval climate created natural constraints on treat production that required confectioners to work within seasonal limitations while developing techniques that maximize the use of available resources. Cold winters that made fresh ingredients unavailable led to sophisticated preservation methods, while short growing seasons for certain plants required careful timing to capture peak flavors and nutritional content. These environmental constraints encouraged innovation and efficiency that produced superior results within the limitations imposed by natural conditions. Regional variations in medieval treats reflected not just different available ingredients, but distinct cultural approaches to sweetness, texture, and presentation that created unique food traditions within broader medieval society. These regional differences weren't just practical adaptations, but expressions of cultural identity that helped define community character and provided sources of local pride. Travelers often sought out regional specialties as ways of experiencing the unique character of different places and communities. The medieval understanding of nutrition in treats was more sophisticated than often recognized, based on practical knowledge of how different ingredients affected energy levels, digestion, and overall health. Confectioners understood that honey provided quick energy while nuts contributed lasting satisfaction, leading to combinations that balanced immediate gratification with sustained nourishment. This nutritional wisdom was gained through generations of observation and experience, rather than scientific analysis, but produced results. that align well with modern understanding of nutrition? Medieval festival treats often incorporated symbolic elements that connected physical consumption with spiritual or cultural meanings, creating eating experiences that engaged multiple levels of human consciousness simultaneously. These symbolic treats weren't just food but edible expressions of community, values, and beliefs that helped reinforce cultural identity and social cohesion. The preparation and consumption of these meaningful treats became important community activities that strengthened social bonds while providing physical satisfaction. The medieval relationship between wealth and access to treats created social dynamics that don't exist in modern consumer culture, where the scarcity of sweet indulgences made them powerful symbols of status and prosperity. The ability to share precious treats with others became a way of demonstrating both wealth and generosity, creating social capital that could be more valuable than the monetary cost of the treats themselves. These social dynamics around treat consumption help maintain community hierarchies while also providing mechanisms for social mobility and relationship building. Medieval confectioners understood the psychological power of anticipation in ways that enhanced the overall treat experience far beyond what the actual consumption could provide. The knowledge that a special honey cake or candied fruit would be available only at certain times of year created periods of looking forward that were almost as satisfying as the treats themselves. This anticipation wasn't just passive waiting, but active preparation, as families would save coins and plan special occasions around the availability of particular treats, creating extended periods of pleasure that began long before the first bite. The development of specialized tools for medieval confectionery represented significant investments for craftsmen who were serious about their trade, though these tools were simple by modern standards. A confectioner might own specially shaped spoons for stirring honey to exactly the right consistency, or small molds carved from wood or stone for shaping candied preparations. These tools were often handmade by the confectioners themselves or commissioned from local craftsmen, creating unique implements that were perfectly suited to their specific techniques and requirements. Medieval children learned about treats not through constant exposure, but through careful observation of preparation processes and occasional participation in special consumption rituals. A child might be allowed to help stir honey while it cooked, learning through direct experience how the consistency changed as it heated and how timing affected the final result. These learning experiences created deep appreciation for the skill and effort required to produce treats, making each eating occasion more meaningful because the child understood what went into creating it. The medieval concept of seasonal eating extended to treats in ways that created natural variety and prevented the kind of sweet fatigue that constant availability might produce. Spring treats featured tender new herbs and the first flowers that could be candied, creating delicate flavors that celebrated the renewal of the growing season. Summer brought the intense sweetness of fruits at their peak, preserved in ways that concentrated their flavors into almost explosive bursts of taste. Autumn offered the rich, satisfying flavors of nuts and the final honey harvest, creating substantial treats that helped prepare bodies and spirits for the coming winter. Medieval religious communities developed their own traditions around treats that reflected their spiritual values while still acknowledging human needs for pleasure and indulgence. Monastery gardens often included plants specifically grown for their confectionery value, and monks became skilled at creating treats that could be shared with visitors or used to celebrate religious festivals. These religious treats often incorporated symbolic elements or were prepared using meditation-like processes that connected the physical act of cooking with spiritual contemplation. The medieval understanding of flavor development through slow cooking processes produced treats with depth and complexity that can't be rushed or replicated using modern high-heat methods. Honey that was slowly reduced over low fires developed caramelized notes and complex flavor, compounds that created much more interesting taste experiences than simple sweetness could provide. These slow cooking methods required patience and skill, but produced results that were far superior to anything that could be achieved through shortcuts or speed. Medieval trade relationships created opportunities for ingredient exchanges that led to innovative treat combinations, as merchants brought back small quantities of exotic spices or unusual sweeteners that local confectioners would experiment with in limited batches. A single exotic spice might be divided among several confectioners in a community, each trying different approaches to incorporating it into their existing preparations. These experiments often led to new signature treats that became associated with particular craftsmen or communities. The medieval approach to food decoration in treats used natural materials in ways that were both beautiful and functional, adding flavors and textures along with visual appeal. Flower petals weren't just pretty garnishes, but contributed subtle flavors and sometimes beneficial properties like digestive aids or natural preservatives. Seeds and nuts were arranged not just for appearance, but to create textural contrasts that enhance the eating experience. This integration of aesthetic and functional elements created treats that were more satisfying on multiple levels. Medieval preservation techniques for treats often involved multiple steps and processes that created complex flavors through controlled fermentation and aging. Fruits might be partially dried, then treated with honey, then aged in specific conditions that allowed beneficial flavor changes to occur over time. These multi-step processes required deep understanding of how different treatments affected the final product, and the patience to allow time for proper development of flavors and textures. The social aspects of medieval treat consumption created community bonding experiences that went far beyond simple food sharing to include storytelling, music, and other forms of entertainment that enhanced the overall experience. A family sharing the special honey cake might combine the eating with songs or stories that had been passed down through generations, creating multi-sensory experiences that engaged memory and emotion along with taste. These combined experiences created stronger and more lasting memories than food alone could provide. Medieval confectioners developed techniques for creating layered treats that revealed different flavors and textures as they were consumed, providing evolving eating experiences that kept the consumer engaged throughout. A confection might begin with a crispy exterior that gave way to chewy layers beneath, each with different flavor profiles that complemented the others while providing distinct experiences. These layered preparations required careful timing and technique to achieve proper binding between layers while maintaining their individual characteristics. The medieval understanding of portion control in treat consumption was based on practical experience with how different amounts of sweet foods affected energy levels and overall well-being. People learned through direct experience that small amounts of intense treats could provide more satisfaction than larger quantities of less concentrated sweets, leading to consumption patterns that maximized pleasure while minimizing negative effects. This practical wisdom created sustainable approaches to indulgence that allowed regular enjoyment without excess. Medieval festival cycles created rhythms of treat preparation and consumption that connected food to broader patterns of community life and seasonal celebration. Confectioners would begin preparing certain treats weeks or even months before they would be consumed, timing their preparation to coincide with ingredient availability and festival dates. These extended preparation periods created anticipation throughout the community and ensured that treats would be at their peak quality when consumed. The medieval concept of hospitality often centered around the sharing of special treats, making confectionery skills important social assets that could enhance family reputation and community standing. A household known for producing excellent honey cakes or candied fruits would attract visitors and invitations, creating social opportunities that extended far beyond the immediate pleasure of the treats themselves. These social benefits made investment in confectionery skills worthwhile, even for families with limited resources. Medieval confectioners understood the importance of texture variety in creating satisfying treats, using combinations of ingredients and preparation methods that provided contrasting mouthfeels within single preparations. A treat might combine the smoothness of well-processed honey with the crunch of nuts and the chewiness of dried fruits, creating complex textural experiences that kept the eater interested and satisfied. These textural combinations required understanding of how different ingredients behaved under various cooking conditions and how they would interact when combined. The medieval approach to natural flavoring used local plants and herbs in ways that created unique taste profiles that can't be replicated using modern artificial flavorings. Wild herbs provided subtle background notes that complemented primary flavors without overwhelming them, while flower essences added delicate fragrances that enhanced the overall sensory experience. These natural flavorings were often seasonal and variable, creating treats that captured the essence of specific times and places in ways that standardized modern flavorings cannot match. Medieval storage techniques for treats took advantage of natural preservation properties of ingredients while also utilizing environmental conditions to maintain quality over extended periods. Honey-based treats might be stored in cool, dry places where their natural antimicrobial properties would prevent spoilage, while nut-based preparations might be kept in containers that allowed controlled air circulation to prevent rancidity. These storage methods required understanding of how different ingredients deteriorated and what conditions would best preserve their quality and appeal. The medieval concept of treat quality was based on criteria that emphasized flavor intensity, textural interest, and visual appeal in ways that created holistic standards for excellence. A superior treat wasn't just sweet, but provided complex flavors that developed and changed during consumption, textures that created satisfying mouthfeel, and appearance that enhanced anticipation and enjoyment. These quality standards drove innovation and improvement in preparation techniques as confectioners competed to create the most appealing products. Medieval apprenticeship systems for confectioners created knowledge transfer that went far beyond technical skills to include understanding of customer preferences, seasonal timing, and business practices that were essential for success. Apprentices learned not just how to make treats, but when to make them, how to price them appropriately, and how to present them in ways that maximize their appeal. This comprehensive training created professionals who understood all aspects of the confectionery trade. The medieval relationship between treats and medicine was complex and sophisticated, recognizing that certain sweet preparations could provide genuine health benefits while also acknowledging that excessive consumption could be harmful. Confectioners often collaborated with healers to create preparations that combined medicinal herbs with sweeteners in ways that made beneficial treatments more palatable and effective. These medicinal treats required understanding of proper dosages and combinations to ensure safety while maximizing therapeutic benefits. Medieval regional competitions and festivals created opportunities for confectioners to showcase their skills and innovations, leading to exchanges of techniques and ideas that drove overall improvement in treat quality and variety. These competitions weren't just commercial events, but social occasions that celebrated craftsmanship and creativity, while providing entertainment for communities. Winners of these competitions gained reputations that could enhance their business prospects for years to come. The medieval understanding of ingredient interactions in confectionery was based on empirical knowledge gained through generations of experimentation and refinement. Confectioners learned through trial and error which combinations of sweeteners, flavors, and textures worked well together and which should be avoided. This accumulated knowledge was passed down through apprenticeships and professional relationships, creating a body of practical wisdom that guided innovation while preventing costly mistakes. Medieval treat packaging and presentation used natural materials in ways that enhanced both preservation and visual appeal, creating attractive presentations that heightened anticipation and made consumption more ceremonial. Treats might be wrapped in leaves that added subtle flavors while protecting the contents, or presented on specially prepared wooden plates that complemented their appearance. These presentation methods were integral parts of the overall treat experience, rather than mere conveniences. The medieval concept of seasonal appropriateness in treats reflected understanding of how different flavors and ingredients complemented the moods and activities associated with different times of year. Light, delicate treats featuring herbs and flowers were considered appropriate for spring, when people were emerging from winter's constraints and celebrating renewal. Rich, substantial treats with nuts and concentrated sweeteners were preferred in autumn, when people were preparing for winter's challenges and needed more substantial nourishment. Medieval confectioners developed signature preparations that became associated with their skills and reputations, creating personal brands that attracted customers and commanded premium prices. These signature treats often incorporated unique techniques or ingredient combinations that couldn't be easily replicated by competitors, providing sustainable competitive advantages. The development of these signature preparations required both technical skill and creative innovation, as confectioners sought ways to distinguish their products in competitive markets. The medieval approach to treat innovation balanced respect for traditional methods with willingness to experiment with new ingredients and techniques, creating evolutionary development that improved quality while maintaining connection to established practices. Confectioners might modify traditional recipes by incorporating new spices or adjusting preparation methods, testing these modifications carefully before introducing them to customers. This balanced approach to innovation ensured that improvements were genuine rather than mere novelties. Medieval customer relationships in the confectionery trade were personal and long-term, based on mutual understanding of preferences, quality standards, and special occasion needs. Confectioners knew their regular customers well enough to suggest appropriate treats for specific occasions and to time preparation of special orders to meet important dates. These personal relationships created customer loyalty that went beyond simple commercial transactions to include elements of friendship and community connection. The medieval understanding of treat consumption timing recognized that different types of sweet foods were appropriate for different times of day and different types of activities. Light, easily digestible treats might be consumed in the morning to provide quick energy for daily work, while richer, more substantial confections were reserved for evening consumption when slower digestion was acceptable. This timing awareness helped people maximize the benefits of treat consumption while minimizing potential negative effects. Medieval preservation of confectionery knowledge happened through multiple channels, including formal apprenticeships, family traditions, and community sharing that ensured important techniques and recipes wouldn't be lost even if individual practitioners disappeared. Families often maintained their own confectionery traditions that were passed down through generations, while communities preserved collective knowledge about local specialties and seasonal preparations. This multiple-channel preservation created redundancy that protected valuable knowledge against loss. The medieval concept of treat variety was based on seasonal availability and creative adaptation, rather than the constant availability of multiple options that characterizes modern consumption. Confectioners created variety by modifying basic preparations to incorporate different seasonal ingredients, adjusting textures through preparation variations, and creating special versions for particular occasions. This approach to variety created anticipation and satisfaction that came from experiencing familiar treats in new ways, rather than completely different products. Medieval quality control in confectionery relied on sensory evaluation and customer feedback rather than standardized measurements or scientific testing. Confectioners developed highly refined senses of taste, smell, and texture that allowed them to detect subtle variations in their products and adjust techniques accordingly. Customer reactions provided immediate feedback about quality and appeal, creating direct market-based quality control that ensured successful products continued to be produced, while unsuccessful ones were quickly abandoned. The medieval relationship between confectioners and other food artisans created networks of cooperation and knowledge sharing that benefited entire communities. Bakers might share oven space with confectioners during slow periods, while spice merchants might collaborate on special preparations that showcased exotic ingredients. These professional relationships created synergies that improved the overall quality and variety of treats available to community members, while also providing economic benefits to the craftsmen involved. Medieval treat consumption patterns reflected broader cultural values about moderation, celebration, and community sharing that created sustainable approaches to indulgence. Treats were consumed mindfully and in appropriate contexts rather than casually or constantly, making each consumption experience more meaningful and satisfying. These consumption patterns were reinforced by economic constraints and social expectations that discouraged excess while encouraging appreciation of quality and craftsmanship. The medieval development of specialized confectionery techniques required investments of time and resources that were justified by the superior results they produced compared to simpler methods. Confectioners who mastered these specialized techniques could command higher prices for their products while also gaining reputations that attracted customers from beyond their immediate communities. The economic rewards for developing specialized skills encouraged innovation and quality improvement throughout the confectionery trade. Medieval understanding of customer psychology in confectionery recognized that anticipation, presentation, and social context were as important as actual taste in creating satisfying treat experiences. Confectioners learned to enhance anticipation through attractive displays and tantalizing aromas, to improve presentation through careful attention to visual appeal, and to encourage social consumption through appropriate portion sizes and ceremonial elements. This holistic understanding of customer experience created more successful businesses and more satisfied consumers. The medieval concept of confectionery mastery encompassed technical skills, creative abilities, business acumen, and social awareness that together created practitioners who could succeed in competitive markets while contributing to community life. Master confectioners were respected artisans who combined practical skills with artistic sensibilities to create products that satisfied multiple human needs beyond simple nutrition. The respect accorded these masters reflected recognition of the genuine skill and knowledge required for excellence in their trade. Medieval seasonal rhythms in confectionery created natural cycles of preparation, consumption, and rest that prevented the kind of sensory fatigue that constant availability might produce, while also creating anticipation that enhanced enjoyment when treats became available again. These seasonal rhythms were closely tied to agricultural cycles and community celebrations, connecting treat consumption to broader patterns of natural and social life in ways that created meaning beyond simple gustatory pleasure. The medieval approach to ingredient sourcing for confectionery created relationships between confectioners and suppliers that extended beyond simple commercial transactions to include knowledge sharing, quality collaboration, and mutual support during difficult periods. Confectioners often worked closely with beekeepers to ensure steady supplies of high-quality honey, with farmers to obtain the best nuts and fruits, and with herb gatherers to secure specific plants for flavoring. These relationships created supply networks that benefited all participants while ensuring consistent quality for end products. Medieval innovation in confectionery was driven by practical needs, creative impulses, and competitive pressures that together created steady improvement in techniques and products over time. Practical needs for better preservation methods led to innovations in ingredient treatment and storage. Creative impulses drove experiments with new flavor combinations and textural effects, and competitive pressures encouraged confectioners to develop unique offerings that would attract customers. This combination of motivating factors created sustained innovation that improved the overall quality and variety of available treats. The medieval concept of appropriate consumption contexts for different types of treats reflected sophisticated understanding of how social setting, timing, and ceremonial elements affected the overall satisfaction derived from sweet foods. Certain treats were considered appropriate for private family consumption, while others were designed for public sharing and community celebration. Understanding these social contexts was important for both producers and consumers, as it helped ensure that treats were consumed in ways that maximized their social and psychological benefits. Medieval preservation of treat-making traditions required active transmission of knowledge from experienced practitioners to newcomers, creating educational systems that were informal but highly effective in maintaining quality standards and innovative capacity. These transmission systems relied on personal relationships, hands-on training, and gradual assumption of responsibility that ensured knowledge was truly internalized rather than merely memorized. The effectiveness of these traditional educational methods is demonstrated by the survival of many medieval confectionery techniques through centuries of social and technological change. The medieval understanding of treat economics recognized that the value of sweet foods extended far beyond their nutritional content to include social, psychological, and cultural benefits that justified their relatively high costs. Communities were willing to allocate significant resources to confectionery because they understood that treats contributed to social cohesion, individual satisfaction, and cultural identity in ways that were essential for community well-being. This broader understanding of value created sustainable markets for quality confectionery that supported skilled practitioners and encouraged continued innovation. Medieval confectionery workshops were centers of community activity that extended far beyond simple food production to include social gathering, knowledge sharing, and cultural transmission that enriched community life. People would visit confectionery workshops not just to purchase treats, but to exchange news, learn about techniques, and participate in the social activities that naturally arose around the preparation of special foods. These workshops became informal community centers that contributed to social cohesion, while also serving their primary commercial functions. The medieval relationship between confectioners and seasonal celebrations created symbiotic relationships that enhanced both the commercial success of treat makers and the satisfaction of community celebrations. Confectioners developed special preparations for specific festivals and holidays, while communities planned their celebrations around the availability of traditional treats that had become integral parts of seasonal observances. These relationships created reliable markets for confectioners, while ensuring that celebrations included the special foods that made them memorable and meaningful. Medieval quality standards for treats were enforced through market mechanisms and social pressure rather than formal regulations, creating systems that were flexible but effective in ensuring customer satisfaction. Confectioners who consistently produced inferior products would lose customers to competitors, while those who maintained high standards would gain reputations that allowed them to charge premium prices. Community social pressure also played a role, as confectioners who produced poor quality treats might face social sanctions that affected their standing in the community beyond their business prospects. The medieval development of regional confectionery specialties created food tourism of that law letter, as people would travel specifically to obtain treats that were only available in certain areas or from particular craftsmen. These regional specialties often became sources of community pride and economic advantage, attracting visitors who would spend money on other goods and services while seeking special treats. The development of these specialties required innovation and quality that distinguished local products from those available elsewhere, driving improvement and creativity in confectionery practices. Medieval understanding of the psychology of treat consumption recognized that scarcity and special occasion consumption created more satisfaction than constant availability, leading to practices that enhanced enjoyment through careful timing and appropriate contexts. Families would save special treats for important occasions. Communities would plan celebrations around the availability of seasonal confections, and individuals would practice self-discipline that made each treat experience more meaningful. This psychological wisdom created sustainable approaches to indulgence that maximize satisfaction while preventing excess. The medieval concept of confectionery artistry recognized that excellent treats were not just food but expressions of creativity and skill that deserved appreciation and respect comparable to other artistic endeavors. Master confectioners were considered artists whose work brought beauty and joy to community life, and their creations were valued for their aesthetic and creative qualities, as well as their taste and nutritional value. This artistic recognition motivated confectioners to pursue excellence and innovation that went beyond mere commercial success to include artistic achievement and community contribution. Medieval confectioners developed an intricate understanding of how different cooking vessels affected the flavor and texture of their treats, leading to specialized equipment that was carefully maintained and sometimes passed down through generations of practitioners. Copper pots were prized for honey preparation because they conducted heat evenly and allowed precise temperature control, while wooden bowls were preferred for mixing certain ingredients because they didn't impart metallic flavors or react with acidic components. Clay vessels were used for slow cooking processes that required gentle, sustained heat, and their porous surfaces sometimes contributed subtle earthy notes that enhanced certain preparations. The medieval approach to ingredient timing in confectionery recognized that the sequence and timing of ingredient additions could dramatically affect final results, leading to precise procedures that were followed religiously by skilled practitioners. Honey might need to reach exactly the right temperature before nuts could be added without causing texture problems, while spices require specific timing to release their flavors properly without becoming bitter or overwhelming. These timing requirements were learned through years of experience and practice, creating knowledge that couldn't be easily transferred through written instructions, but required hands-on training and careful observation. Medieval preservation techniques for treats often involved multiple layers of protection that worked together to maintain quality over extended periods while also enhancing flavors through controlled aging processes. A candied fruit might be first treated with honey, then wrapped in specially prepared leaves, then stored in containers with additional preservative materials like aromatic woods or protective spices. These multi-layer preservation systems required understanding of how different materials interacted and how environmental conditions would affect the aging process, knowledge that was developed through careful experimentation and observation over time. The medieval concept of treat seasonality extended beyond simple ingredient availability to include understanding of how different flavors and textures complemented the physical and emotional needs associated with different times of year. Winter treats were often designed to provide comfort and warmth during cold months, incorporating spices and rich ingredients that created internal warming sensations. Spring treats celebrated renewal and lightness with delicate flavors that matched the emerging freshness of the natural world. Summer preparations captured the abundance and intensity of peak growing season, while autumn treats provided satisfaction and preparation for the coming winter months. Medieval confectioners understood the importance of water quality in their preparations, often traveling significant distances to obtain water with specific mineral contents that enhanced their products. Some waters were known to create superior results when used for dissolving honey, while others were preferred for cleaning ingredients or creating specific textures in finished treats. The mineral content, temperature, and purity of water could all affect the final quality of confections, making water sourcing an important consideration for serious practitioners who wanted to achieve consistent excellence in their products. The medieval relationship between confectionery and herbal medicine created hybrid preparations that served both gustatory and therapeutic purposes, requiring knowledge of proper dosages and combinations to ensure safety while maximizing benefits. These medicinal treats often incorporated bitter herbs that needed to be balanced with appropriate amounts of sweetener to remain palatable, while still maintaining sufficient concentrations of active compounds to provide therapeutic effects. Confectioners who specialized in these preparations needed understanding of both culinary and medical principles, making them important community health resources as well as food providers. Medieval festival preparations for special treats began weeks or months in advance, creating extended periods of anticipation and community involvement that enhanced the eventual consumption experience far beyond what the treats themselves could provide. Communities would collectively plan for major celebrations, with different families taking responsibility for various types of treats and sharing resources and labor to ensure successful outcomes. These collaborative preparations created social bonding and shared investment that made the eventual celebrations more meaningful and memorable for all participants. The medieval understanding of flavor balance in treats recognized that sweetness needed to be complemented by other taste elements to create truly satisfying experiences, leading to complex preparations that engaged multiple taste sensations simultaneously. A successful treat might combine the sweetness of honey with the slight bitterness of certain nuts, the tartness of preserved fruits, and the warming sensation of carefully chosen spices. These balanced flavor profiles prevented the cloying effects that pure sweetness might produce, while creating more interesting and satisfying eating experiences that kept consumers engaged throughout consumption. Medieval storage solutions for treats often took advantage of natural antimicrobial properties of certain materials, while also utilizing environmental conditions to maintain optimal quality over time. Honey-based preparations might be stored in wooden containers that had been seasoned with aromatic herbs, creating storage environments that enhanced flavors while preventing spoilage. Clay pots with tight-fitting lids provided protection from moisture and pests, while allowing controlled air exchange that prevented staleness. These storage methods were developed through generations of experience with different approaches and represented accumulated wisdom about food preservation under medieval conditions. The medieval concept of confectionery presentation recognized that visual appeal was an integral component of treat quality rather than mere decoration, leading to preparation methods that created attractive appearances while also enhancing flavors and textures. Natural colorings from flower petals and fruit juices weren't just cosmetic additions, but contributed subtle flavors and sometimes beneficial nutritional components. Careful arrangement of ingredients within treats created visual patterns that pleased the eye while also ensuring even distribution of flavors throughout the preparation. These presentation considerations required artistic sensibilities alongside technical skills, making confectionery a truly artistic endeavor. Medieval apprenticeship relationships in confectionery often lasted for many years and created deep personal bonds between masters and students that continued throughout their careers and sometimes extended to subsequent generations. These relationships involved not just technical training, but also character development and business education that prepared apprentices for eventual independence. Masters took genuine interest in their apprentices' success and often provided ongoing support and advice even after formal training was complete. Apprentices, in turn, often maintained loyalty and respect for their masters that lasted lifetimes, creating professional networks based on personal relationships and mutual obligation. The medieval development of signature confectionery techniques required years of experimentation and refinement as practitioners sought to create unique products that would distinguish them from competitors while meeting customer expectations for quality and appeal. These signature techniques often involved subtle modifications of traditional methods that produced distinctly different results, or creative combinations of existing techniques that created entirely new types of treats. The development process required patience, persistence, and willingness to accept failures and setbacks as learning opportunities rather than discouragements. Medieval understanding of ingredient interactions in confectionery was based on empirical observation and practical experience rather than scientific analysis, but often produced insights that align well with modern food science knowledge. Confectioners learned through trial and error which combinations of ingredients worked well together and which should be avoided, developing practical rules that guided their work even though they might not understand the chemical principles involved. This empirical approach to ingredient interactions created reliable methods for producing consistent results while also leaving room for creative experimentation and innovation. The medieval concept of appropriate portion sizes for treats was based on understanding of how different amounts affected satisfaction and well-being. leading to serving practices that maximized enjoyment while preventing negative consequences. Small portions of intensely flavored treats often provided more satisfaction than larger amounts of less concentrated preparations, while sharing practices ensured that precious treats were distributed fairly among community members. These portion control practices were reinforced by economic constraints and social expectations that discouraged waste or excessive consumption. Medieval regional variations in confectionery reflected not just different ingredient availability, but distinct cultural attitudes towards sweetness, indulgence, and celebration that created unique food traditions within broader medieval society. Some regions developed preferences for subtle, delicate flavors that required sophisticated preparation techniques, while others favored bold, intense tastes that showcased local specialties. These regional differences weren't arbitrary, but reflected deeper cultural values and historical experiences that shaped community preferences and created distinctive local identities through food traditions. The medieval relationship between confectioners and religious institutions created opportunities for knowledge exchange and resource sharing that benefited both parties while also contributing to community welfare. Monasteries often maintained extensive herb gardens and possessed knowledge of medicinal plants that could enhance confectionery preparations, while confectioners brought technical skills and commercial experience that helped religious communities develop sustainable income sources. These collaborations sometimes produced innovations that combined spiritual contemplation with practical food preparation, creating unique approaches to confectionery that emphasized mindfulness and quality over mere commercial success. Medieval market dynamics in confectionery created competitive environments that drove innovation and quality improvement while also providing opportunities for collaboration and knowledge sharing among practitioners. Confectioners competed for customers through quality, uniqueness, and service while also sharing information about suppliers, techniques, and market conditions that helped the entire industry develop. These market relationships created balance between competition and cooperation that encouraged excellence while preventing destructive rivalries that might harm community well-being. The medieval understanding of confectionery as both craft and art recognized that excellent treats required technical skill, creative vision, and deep understanding of customer needs and preferences. Master confectioners were respected community members whose work contributed to social celebrations, individual satisfaction, and cultural continuity in ways that extended far beyond simple commerce. This recognition of confectionery as meaningful work attracted talented individuals who might otherwise have pursued different occupations, ensuring that the craft attracted practitioners capable of maintaining and improving quality standards. Medieval seasonal rhythms in confectionery preparation created natural work cycles that balanced intensive production periods with quieter times for planning, experimentation, and skill development. The busiest periods often coincided with major festivals and celebrations when demand for treats was highest, while quieter seasons provided opportunities for confectioners to develop new recipes, improve techniques, and prepare equipment for future busy periods. These cyclical work patterns created sustainable approaches to production that prevented burnout while ensuring readiness for peak demand periods. The medieval concept of confectionery quality encompassed multiple dimensions, including taste, texture, appearance, and cultural appropriateness, creating holistic standards that evaluated treats based on their complete contribution to human satisfaction and social needs. A superior treat wasn't just delicious but also visually appealing, texturally interesting, and appropriate for its intended consumption context. These comprehensive quality standards encourage confectioners to develop multiple skills and to consider all aspects of their products rather than focusing narrowly on single characteristics like sweetness or appearance. Medieval preservation of confectionery knowledge relied on both formal training relationships and informal community sharing that created redundant systems for maintaining important techniques and recipes across generations. Families often maintained their own confectionery traditions that were passed down through inheritance and marriage relationships, while communities preserved collective knowledge about seasonal preparations and local specialties. Professional relationships between confectioners also created networks for sharing innovations and solving technical problems that might arise in production. The medieval approach to confectionery innovation balanced respect for proven traditional methods with openness to creative experimentation that could lead to improvements or entirely new preparations. Confectioners understood that traditional techniques had been refined through generations of practice and generally produced reliable results, but they also recognized that creative modifications might lead to superior products or unique offerings that could attract new customers. This balanced approach to tradition and innovation created evolutionary development that improved quality while maintaining connection to established practices and cultural values. Medieval customer relationships in confectionery were characterized by personal knowledge and long-term commitment that created mutual benefits for both producers and consumers. Confectioners knew their regular customers well enough to anticipate their preferences, suggest appropriate treats for special occasions, and adjust preparations to meet individual needs and tastes. Customers, in turn, developed loyalty based on consistent quality and personal service that went beyond simple commercial transactions to include elements of friendship and community connection. The medieval understanding of treat consumption contexts recognized that the same confection might provide different levels of satisfaction depending on when, where, and with whom it was consumed, leading to careful attention to appropriate timing and social settings. Certain treats were considered most appropriate for private family consumption, while others were designed for public sharing and community celebration. Religious observances might call for specific types of treats that carried symbolic meaning alongside their gustatory appeal. Understanding these contextual considerations was important for both producers and consumers, who wanted to maximize satisfaction and social appropriateness. Medieval confectionery workshops served multiple community functions beyond their primary commercial purposes, acting as informal gathering places where people could exchange news, share knowledge, and participate in social activities that enriched community life. The preparation of treats often involved multiple people working together, creating opportunities for conversation and relationship building that strengthened social bonds. Customers visiting workshops to purchase treats might stay to observe preparation processes or participate in discussions about techniques and ingredients, making these workshops important centers of community activity and knowledge sharing. The medieval relationship between confectioners and seasonal celebrations created symbiotic dependencies that enhanced both the success of treat makers and the satisfaction of community observances. Traditional celebrations often featured specific treats that had become integral parts of the observance, while confectioners developed their annual production cycles around these predictable seasonal demands. These relationships created reliable income sources for confectioners while ensuring that celebrations included the special foods that helped define their character and meaning for community members. Medieval understanding of the therapeutic aspects of treat consumption recognized that appropriate indulgence could contribute to physical and mental well-being in ways that justified the expense and effort required to produce quality confections. The psychological benefits of occasional treats were understood to include mood enhancement, stress relief, and social bonding that could improve overall health and life satisfaction. This therapeutic understanding of treats helped communities justify allocating resources to confectionery, even during periods of scarcity, recognizing that some forms of indulgence were necessary for human well-being. The medieval development of confectionery specialties required intensive focus and resource allocation that was only justified by the superior results and competitive advantages that specialization could provide. Confectioners who chose to specialize in particular types of treats needed to develop exceptional skills and maintain consistently high standards to succeed in competitive markets where customers had alternatives. This specialization pressure drove innovation and quality improvement as practitioners sought ways to distinguish their products and justify premium pricing through superior quality and unique characteristics. Medieval quality control in confectionery relied primarily on sensory evaluation and immediate customer feedback rather than standardized testing procedures, creating direct market-based systems that quickly identified successful products and eliminated unsuccessful ones. Confectioners developed highly refined sensory abilities that allowed them to detect subtle variations in their products and make appropriate adjustments to maintain consistency and quality. Customer reactions provided immediate feedback about appeal and satisfaction, creating responsive quality control systems that ensured continued success for products that met market demands. The medieval concept of confectionery mastery encompassed technical skills, business acumen, artistic sensibility, and community awareness that together created practitioners capable of contributing meaningfully to both commerce and culture. Master confectioners were respected artisans whose work brought pleasure and satisfaction to community life while also providing sustainable livelihoods for themselves and their families. The respect accorded these masters reflected recognition of the genuine skill and dedication required for excellence in their demanding craft, as well as appreciation for their contributions to community well-being and cultural continuity. Medieval approaches to confectionery education emphasized hands-on learning and gradual assumption of responsibility that ensured thorough internalization of knowledge and skills, rather than mere theoretical understanding. Apprentices learned through direct participation in all aspects of production, from ingredient selection and preparation through final presentation and customer service. This comprehensive education created practitioners who understood their craft thoroughly and could adapt their knowledge to changing conditions or new opportunities that might arise throughout their careers. The medieval understanding of seasonal appropriateness in confectionery extended beyond ingredient availability to include cultural and psychological factors that made certain treats more satisfying at specific times of year. Winter treats often emphasized warming spices and rich ingredients that provided comfort during cold months, while spring preparations celebrated renewal with delicate flavors and light textures. Summer confections captured the abundance of the growing season with intense fruit flavors and refreshing characteristics, while autumn treats provided satisfaction and preparation for winter's challenges through substantial, nourishing ingredients. Medieval preservation techniques for confectionery took advantage of natural antimicrobial and preservative properties of ingredients, while also creating controlled environments that enhanced flavors through careful aging processes. The high sugar content of honey-based treats created hostile environments for harmful microorganisms while encouraging beneficial flavor development over time. Proper storage conditions could actually improve treat quality through controlled aging that allowed flavors to blend and mature, creating products that were superior to their fresh counterparts in complexity and appeal. The medieval relationship between confectioners and other food artisans created networks of cooperation and knowledge sharing that strengthened entire communities' food production capabilities while also providing economic benefits through resource sharing and collaborative projects. Bakers and confectioners might share oven facilities and fuel costs, while spice merchants and confectioners could collaborate on special preparations that showcased exotic ingredients. These professional relationships created synergies that improved overall food quality and variety while also providing social and economic benefits to the craftsmen involved. Medieval treat consumption patterns reflected deeper cultural understanding of pleasure's role in human life, recognizing that complete denial of sweetness and indulgence would be both unrealistic and harmful to individual and community well-being. This balanced approach to pleasure created sustainable practices that allowed regular enjoyment of special foods without falling into excess or wasteful consumption that might harm either personal health or community resources. The wisdom embedded in these traditional approaches to treats demonstrates sophisticated understanding of human psychology and social dynamics that modern consumer culture has largely forgotten. The medieval concept of confectionery as community art form recognized that excellent treats were expressions of cultural values and aesthetic sensibilities that contributed to community identity and pride in ways that extended far beyond their immediate gustatory appeal. Master confectioners were considered artists whose work brought beauty and meaning to community celebrations while also preserving traditional knowledge and techniques that connected present generations with their cultural heritage. This artistic recognition motivated practitioners to pursue excellence that went beyond commercial success to include genuine contribution to community, cultural life, and historical continuity. Medieval seasonal celebrations created natural cycles of anticipation, preparation, and enjoyment that enhanced the psychological and social benefits of treat consumption, while also providing sustainable rhythms for production and consumption that prevented the sensory fatigue and waste that constant availability might produce. These celebratory cycles connected treat consumption to broader patterns of agricultural, religious, and social life that gave meaning and context to indulgence, while also creating reliable markets for confectioners and predictable opportunities for community members to enjoy special foods. The medieval understanding of ingredient quality in confectionery emphasized the connection between superior raw materials and exceptional finished products, leading to careful sourcing practices and long-term relationships between confectioners and suppliers that benefited entire communities through improved food quality and economic cooperation. Confectioners understood that excellent honey, perfectly ripened fruits, and properly harvested nuts were essential foundations for superior treats, making them willing to pay premium prices and invest significant effort in obtaining the best possible ingredients for their preparations. Medieval confectionery workshops became centers of knowledge preservation and transmission that maintained important cultural and technical information across generations, while also serving as laboratories for innovation and experimentation that drove continuous improvement in techniques and products. These workshops housed accumulated wisdom about ingredient behavior, processing methods, and quality standards that represented centuries of refinement and development, while also providing environments where new ideas could be tested and improved through careful, experimentation, and evaluation. The medieval approach to confectionery pricing reflected understanding of the true value these special foods provided to individuals and communities, taking into account not just ingredient costs and labor requirements, but also the social, psychological, and cultural benefits that justified significant investment in quality treats. Communities were willing to allocate substantial resources to confectionery because they understood that treats contributed to celebration, comfort, social bonding, and cultural continuity in ways that were essential for human flourishing and community cohesion. Medieval preservation of confectionery traditions required active commitment from entire communities rather than just individual practitioners, creating collective responsibility for maintaining knowledge and techniques that were considered valuable cultural heritage worth protecting and transmitting to future generations. This community-wide involvement in tradition preservation ensured that important knowledge wouldn't be lost even if individual masters died or moved away, while also creating shared investment in maintaining quality standards and supporting continued innovation within traditional frameworks. The medieval concept of appropriate treat consumption emphasized mindfulness, gratitude, and social awareness that created more satisfying and meaningful experiences than casual or constant snacking could provide, while also reinforcing cultural values about moderation, sharing, and appreciation for craftsmanship. This mindful approach to treat consumption maximized psychological and social benefits while preventing negative consequences that might result from excessive or inappropriate indulgence, creating sustainable patterns of enjoyment that could be maintained throughout lifetime without harm to health or well-being. Medieval confectionery represented the intersection of necessity and pleasure, craft and art, individual skill, and community need that created enduring traditions capable of adapting to changing conditions while maintaining essential characteristics that made them valuable and meaningful across centuries of social and technological change. These traditions demonstrate human creativity's ability to transform simple ingredients into sources of joy and satisfaction through patient skill development, cultural wisdom, and genuine care for community well-being. The legacy of medieval confectionery continues to influence modern approaches to artisanal food production, sustainable agriculture, seasonal eating, and community celebration in ways that connect contemporary life with historical wisdom about human needs and cultural continuity. Understanding these historical approaches to treats and indulgence provides insights into alternative ways of organizing food systems and consumption patterns that might be more satisfying and sustainable than current industrial approaches to sweets and snack foods. Medieval junk food, in all its honey-sweetened, nut-enriched, seasonally appropriate glory, reveals that human desires for treats and indulgences are timeless constants that have always found expression through available ingredients and cultural frameworks, creating endless variations on fundamental themes of sweetness, celebration, and shared pleasure that unite us across centuries with our ancestors, who also sought moments of joy and satisfaction through carefully crafted confections that transformed simple ingredients into sources of delight and community connection that enriched their lives in ways both practical and profound, demonstrating that the human relationship with food has always been about much more than mere nutrition, encompassing art, culture, social bonding, and the endless creative quest to find pleasure and meaning in the simple act of eating something delicious.